Welcome back to Jennie Designs with Paper and this week's episode of Crime and Coloring, where we take an alphabetical journey through the United States and revisit some of the earlier crimes. Before we get to the crime, let's talk about the coloring. For this week's coloring, I am going to use this Memory Box Simon Says Stamp collaboration stamp set. It is one of the Stamptember releases for this year. I will be doing some watercoloring, so I've pulled out watercolor paper, my Misty Stamp Positioner, Versaclear Nocturne Black ink, clear embossing powder, and my Magello Mission Gold watercolors. I will stamp each of the two main swag images onto watercolor paper with that Versaclear ink and heat set the clear embossing powder onto the image. I did have to pull out a smaller separate piece of watercolor paper because both swags would not fit on this one small piece. I am not a watercolor expert, so I just kind of do whatever I think I can do to get the most highlight and low light that I can offer. I like how watercoloring looks and I want to get better at it, so I'm going to continue to watercolor. Okay, now that we've talked about the coloring, let's jump into the crime. This week we are in the great state of Illinois. On December 3rd, 1818, Illinois became the 21st state in the United States. Illinois is known as the land of Lincoln because it is here that Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president of the United States, spent his formative years. Illinois is also famous for being home to the world's largest bottle of ketchup. Illinois was the first state to ratify the 13th Amendment to abolish slavery. Illinois generates more nuclear power than any other state. Illinois is home to the world's only river that flows backward. And Illinois is the location of the sausage vat murder. That is our crime today. The two main characters are Louise Bickenis. I'm going to butcher these German names. It's not because I'm rude, it's because I can't speak German. Louise Bickenis was born to Coulthard Dietrich Bickenis and Wilhelm Heidmann on January 12, 1855, in Landsbergen, which is a town in the Hanover region of Germany. She was the fifth of their 6 children, and her siblings are Frederick, Wilhelmina, Ludwig, Henrik, and Dietrich. When she was 17, she sailed on the ship Maine from Bremen to New York, arriving in New York on November 12th of 1872. She was accompanied by her younger brother Dietrich. And that is the most I could find about her life as a young woman. Our next main character is Adolf Louis Lutgard. Adolf was originally named Adolf Ludwig. I imagine when he came to the States, his middle name was changed, as well as the spelling of his last name. However, he was born on December 27, 1845, and he was born in Gütersloh, which was a province of Westphalia, which is now part of Germany. His parents, Christian Heinrich and Margarita Sophia Severin, had a total of 16 children, 12 other sons and 2 daughters. Adolf was the 4th born in the family and had a twin brother named Heinrich, who died sometime in 1894 or 1895. Adolf's schooling lasted from about the age of 7 to about 14, which was typical of the time for tradesmen's sons. His father was a tanner, and Adolf worked as an apprentice learning the tanning business. During his apprenticeship, he continued to live in his hometown, but instead of living with his family, he lived with his boss. After 2.5 years of work in his hometown, he began to travel throughout Germany, working wherever he could. And at the age of 19, he traveled to London, where he stayed for about 6 months. But he left when he was unable to find any job other than scrubbing restaurant floors. Adolf immigrated to New York City around 1865, 1866, when he was about 20. He had heard that thousands of his countrymen were going to America with very little money, but were able to find work. So, with about $30 to his name, he boarded a ship bound for the United States. After a short time in New York, Adolf traveled to Quincy, Illinois, and joined some friends of his older brother who had also moved to Illinois by that time. He stayed in Quincy for about 4 months and then moved to Chicago in search of a job at a tannery. He did find a job at the Union Hide and Leather Company, but the job was not steady and the pay was not constant, so he also began to take on random jobs such as working as a moving man. From 1866 to 1868, he worked at a different tannery called Angle Crossley and Company, and then moved on to Craig Clark and Company, eventually returning to the Angle Tannery Company and working there till 1872. He worked hard and saved enough money to eventually start his own business. Initially, he built a saloon and sold liquor. But on the side, from a cart, he was selling home-ground meats and sausages. Adolf learned that his German sausages were a hit and eventually was able to build a sausage plant on the southwest corner of Hermitage and Diversity Parkway. And he did this in about 1894. And he was so taken by his own success that in addition to building this factory, he built a 3-story framed house next door to the factory. So Adolf married his first wife, Caroline Ropik, on April 13th of 1872 in Chicago. And they had 2 sons, Max and Arnold. Max was born in 1873 and Arnold followed behind in 1875. However, Caroline died on November 17th of 1877. On January 18th, 1878, I'm getting my centuries mixed up, just 2 months after his wife died, Adolf remarried. Any guesses on his second wife? Yeah, his second wife's name was Louisa Bickenes. Louisa was an attractive young woman who was 10 years younger than her husband. She was a servant in the Fox River Valley, and she met her husband by chance. I could not find a source stating how they happened to meet. I'm guessing if she was working as a servant, he happened to be in the place where she was working. It is said that he was immediately taken with her. He was entranced by her diminutive stature and tiny frame. She was less than 5 feet tall and looked almost childlike next to her burly husband, who was nearly 6 feet tall by accounts. As a wedding gift to her, he gave her a unique, heavy gold ring. And inside of it, he had gotten her new initials inscribed, LL. So Adolf fathered a total of 6 children, 2 with Caroline and 4 with Louisa. So he had Max and Arnold before Caroline passed away. And then after he was remarried to Louisa, he had Louise, and then Louis, Elsa, and Elmer Paul. However, only 3 of his children survived past the age of 2, Arnold, Louise, and Elmer. So according to friends and neighbors, Adolf's fascination with his beautiful young wife did not last very long. The couple was frequently heard to argue, and their disagreements became so heated that he eventually moved his bedroom from the house to a small chamber inside of the factory. Adolf soon became involved with a girl named Mary Simmerling, a household servant, and Louisa's niece. That gives a whole new meaning to keep it in the family. This new scandal got the attention of the people in the neighborhood who were already gossiping about the couple's marital woes. On May 1st, 1897, Louisa disappeared. When questioned by his sons, Adolf told him that their mother had gone out the previous evening to visit her sister. Several days passed and no Louisa. And this was enough for Louisa's family, and her brother Dietrich went to the police. Adolf then claimed to the police that she had run away with another man. During the investigation, the police came to know of the couple's history of domestic violence and that they fought on a regular basis. According to one source, Adolf had financial difficulties, so he had started courting a rich widow who he planned to marry once he got rid of his wife. The police continued their investigation and discovered that on the night of May 1st, the night Louisa disappeared, she was seen entering the factory with her husband at 10:30 p.m. A watchman from the sausage plant confirmed the story, saying that Mr. Lutgert had given him an errand to run and told him he could take the rest of the night off. The police made another shocking discovery. Just a short time before Louisa's disappearance, the factory had been closed for 10 weeks for reorganization. However, the day before Louisa vanished, Adolf had ordered 378 pounds of crude potash and 50 pounds of arsenic. The police detective in charge became convinced that Adolf had killed his wife, boiled her in the acid, and then disposed of her in a factory furnace. With that in mind, he and his men started another search at the sausage plant. They narrowed the search to the basement and to a 12-foot-long, 5-foot-deep vat that was located next to the furnace that was used to smoke the meat. The police officers drained the greasy paste from the vat and began poking through the residue with sticks. Here, an officer found bone fragments, identified later by forensic anthropologists as metatarsal bones, toes, a rib, and a small piece of skull fragment, identified as being female and human. In addition, they found 2 gold rings. One of them was engraved with the initials LL. Dun, dun, dun. This is where the scary music comes in, right? There were no witnesses to the crime, but the police officers and prosecutors felt that there was overwhelming evidence to arrest her husband, and so they did on May 7th, 1897. So Adolf's first murder trial, yes, I said first, began in August of 1897, and it took place in the Cook County Courthouse. The prosecution presented bone fragments and the ring inscribed LL recovered from the vat in the sausage factory as its main evidence that Louisa had been killed there. The defense argued that Louisa had left her house freely on May 1st, citing many claims of people around the United States that said they had seen her after the trial began. During the trial, observers thought that Adolf seemed unconcerned and overly confident that he would be found innocent. The jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict, resulting in a hung jury. So the case was retried in January of the next year, 1898, in the same courthouse. This time, the prosecution used George Amos Dorsey, an anthropologist from the Field Columbian Museum in Chicago, as an expert witness to prove that the bones found were human. Keep in mind that these bones were found in a meat processing plant, and I'm assuming or supposing that the defense had used that as a way to lessen the severity of finding the bones in this vat. Okay, so in the second trial, the prosecution brings in this genius man or this expert who said, "Oh no, those are human bones." Okay, this time, the jury came to a unanimous verdict that Adolf was guilty. He was convicted and sentenced to life in prison on February 9th, 1898. He was taken away to prison where he became a shell of his former self. He babbled incoherently to the guards, claiming that his dead wife was haunting him, intent on having her revenge, even though he was innocent of her murder. He was not the only one to suffer. His attorney, Lawrence Herman, believed that his client was telling the truth and that he did not kill his wife. He was sure that she had simply disappeared. In fact, Herman was so convinced of Adolf's innocence that he spent over $2,000 of his own money and devoted the rest of his life to finding Louisa. Eventually, he also went insane and he died in a mental institution. On July 7th of 1899, Adolf was found dead in his cell at the Illinois State Penitentiary. The official cause of death was fatty degenerative heart disease. This case was one of the first trials to be widely covered by the media. Newspapers from Chicago reported on it daily, and some of the reporters reportedly tried to eavesdrop on jury deliberations. This case was also one of the earliest to use anthropologists as a forensic expert in a trial. There were many, quote, sightings of Louisa after the trial began. She was sighted in 12 different states but never found. One of the most famous myths that she was seen boarding a ship in New York bound for Europe. When Adolf heard this, he said that he thought she was definitely fleeing the country. Louisa, however, was never reported as seen outside the United States. She was never seen alive again. However, soon after her husband started his sentence in prison, her ghost began to be seen inside her house by her neighbors. Eventually, the house was rented out, but none of the tenants stayed there for long. Reports of Louisa's ghost being seen also included sightings inside the sausage factory. The sausage factory was the scene of a fire on June 26, 1904. It did not burn to the ground, and today the factory stands on the south side of the 1700 block of West Diversity Parkway and has been converted into residential condos. All right, so first of all, how did his first wife die? Because I'm a little suspicious now that he was already working on the third wife before the second one was missing, right? And secondly, ooh, gross. I don't know if I ever want to eat sausage again. I did find some photos of Louisa and Adolf. There we go. Also a sketch of their home. That's a fancy home for those days. And an artist rendition of the sausage plant. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel. I hope you enjoyed our story this week. I have selected a couple of other videos here that I thought you would like, as well as a subscribe button. If you have not yet subscribed to my channel, I would love it if you did so. Give me a comment, give me a thumbs up, and have a really great day.